For over 6 decades, Robert Duvall has occupied a unique and revered space in the landscape of American cinema. He was the embodiment of the consummate professional, an actor whose name was synonymous with integrity, discipline, and a profound, unshakable respect for the craft of acting. In an industry often defined by noise and ego, Duvall was the quiet force, a man who preferred to let his formidable body of work speak for itself. He was the steady hand, the calm presence, the actor other actors looked to as a benchmark for what it meant to be serious about the art. This was the public persona, the mythos carefully built film by film, performance by performance. It was a persona of such consistent strength that it seemed unbreakable. But beneath that placid surface, in the private recesses of memory, lingered a series of old, unhealed wounds. Professional grievances and personal disappointments that he had chosen to bury for a lifetime. Now, at the age of 94, with an Oscar, multiple nominations, and a legacy forever etched into film history, Robert Duvall has decided that the time for silence is over. In a stunningly candid series of revelations, the legendary actor has finally named the 4 colleagues he simply could not stand. Aspetta, pulling back the golden curtain on Hollywood's most carefully guarded secret, that some of its greatest performances were forged not in camaraderie, but in quiet animosity. The decision to break this lifelong silence was not, according to those close to him, born from a fleeting moment of bitterness, or the desire for late career notoriety. It emerged from a far deeper, more reflective place, one that often arrives in the final chapters of a long life. Duvall had reached a point where the historical record, as it was being presented, felt like a profound distortion. He reportedly grew weary of watching Hollywood documentaries and career retrospectives that painted over tense, difficult, and at times toxic professional relationships, with a broad brush of nostalgic harmony and false friendship. The final catalyst for his confession was a recent tribute event celebrating his own remarkable career. As he sat in the audience, he was forced to watch montages of his most iconic performances. Scenes he shared with actors he had secretly held in contempt for decades, all while a narrative of wonderful collaborations and deep mutual respect was woven around them. He described it as listening to revisionist nonsense, a sanitized version of history that erased the very real conflicts and professional sabotage that had occurred. He felt a responsibility, not to tarnish legacies, but to correct the record. To show the next generation of actors that great art is not always born from harmony, but can sometimes emerge from the friction of conflict, jealousy, and profoundly difficult circumstances. The first name on his list sent a particular shockwave through the industry, precisely because of the sheer stature of the individual in question, Marlon Brando. Duvall was unequivocal in his assessment of Brando's genius, readily acknowledging the man's unparalleled talent and transformative impact on the art of acting. However, he paired that admiration with a devastating characterization, calling Brando the most destructively massive ego he had ever encountered in the business. He described Brando as a force of nature who would willingly sabotage an entire production simply to prove that he could, to assert his dominance over a director's vision or a co-star's moment. Their most significant and explosive clash occurred during the chaotic filming of the 1966 film The Chase, a project that gathered a staggering array of Hollywood talent, only to become a behind-the-scenes battleground. Duvall recounted how Brando, if dissatisfied with the director's approach, would deliberately alter his own performance from one take to the next, making the editorial process a nightmare. Worse still, he would engage in subtle, almost imperceptible acts of sabotage during other actors' crucial scenes. Duvall recalled a pivotal monologue of his own being repeatedly ruined because Brando, just off camera, would make small, distracting noises that only the sensitive microphones could pick up, forcing multiple retakes. When Duvall finally confronted him, Brando's response was a calm, condescending smile and a remark that perhaps Duvall should simply be stronger in his own choices. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare, framing professional sabotage as a lesson in artistic strength. Duvall learned more from watching Brando than from anyone else, but the lesson was a dual one. He learned the heights of acting potential, but also the depths to which professional cruelty could sink. If the Brando revelation was shocking for its target, the second name was startling for its profound personal betrayal. Dustin Hoffman, like Duvall, began as a struggling New York actor, and for a time, they were friends, sharing an apartment and the common dream of making it. That early camaraderie, however, quickly curdled into what Duvall perceived as a pattern of relentless creative theft. He described how Hoffman would use their shared living space and rehearsal sessions as an intelligence-gathering operation, borrowing Duvall's meticulously crafted character interpretations and audition approaches, sometimes replicating them word for word for the same roles. This pattern, Duvall claimed, did not cease with their rise to fame. During the production of True Grit, Hoffman would frequently call him, spending hours on the phone picking his brain for vocal and character advice for his role as Ratso Rizzo in Midnight Cowboy. Duvall provided the help, only to later read interviews where Hoffman took full credit, claiming he developed the character solely from observing people on the streets of New York, with no mention of their collaborative calls. The final, unforgivable breach occurred during the casting for The Foch Connection. Duvall believes that Hoffman, in a move that crossed from competition into outright sabotage, told director William Friedkin that Duvall was difficult and uncooperative. A characterization that may have cost him the career-defining role that ultimately went to Gene Hackman. For Duvall, this was not merely professional rivalry. It was a fundamental violation of trust that transformed a former friend into a permanent fixture on his list of professional resentments. The third name cut in a different, more intimate way, precisely because their on-screen chemistry was so powerfully believable. James Caan, his brother in The Godfather, was the third actor Duvall named, describing him as competitive to the point of outright malice. The tension began in early rehearsals for the Coppola masterpiece, with Caan, in his portrayal of the hot-headed Sonny Corleone, seemingly unable to turn off that competitive energy when the cameras stopped rolling. Duvall recounted how Caan would deliberately engage in distracting bits of business with his hands, or make exaggerated facial expressions during Duvall's important lines, all in a transparent effort to pull focus and upstage him. The rivalry reached a tipping point during the filming of the legendary family meeting scene. Between takes, as Duvall was quietly discussing his character's motivations with Coppola, Caan interrupted with a dismissive smirk and a condescending remark about overthinking a glorified secretary role. In that moment, Duvall said he knew they would never be friends. Yet, in a testament to his supreme professionalism, he channeled that very animosity into his performance, deciding that Tom Hagen would always watch Sonny Corleone with a careful, measured wariness, which was exactly what a consigliere would do with a volatile brother like Sonny. The most startling aspect of this revelation is the sheer length and success of the facade. For decades, through countless reunions and interviews, the two men sold the world on the idea of a deep brotherly bond, proving that some of the most authentic relationships on film are the product of masterful acting off-camera as well. The fourth and final name on Duvall's list was perhaps the most explosive of all, as it took aim at one of Hollywood's most pristine and carefully managed reputations, Robert Redford. Duvall described Redford's golden boy public persona, the thoughtful artist, the environmentalist, the man of principle, as a brilliant facade masking a calculating and deeply self-serving individual. Their conflict erupted during the production of The Natural, where Duvall played the cynical journalist Max Mercy, opposite Redford's mythical hero, Roy Hobbs. Duvall alleged that Redford's on-set behaviour was a study in arrogance, frequently keeping entire crews waiting for hours, not for artistic reasons, but to conduct personal business phone calls. More egregiously, Duvall claimed that Redford actively worked behind the scenes to diminish his role, pressuring the director to cut scenes where Mercy challenged Hobbs' heroic narrative, viewing any strong presence opposite him as a threat to his screen dominance. The hypocrisy of this behaviour, juxtaposed with Redford's public image as a champion of collaborative art, was what infuriated Duvall the most. The most damning moment came when Duvall confronted Redford directly about these manoeuvres. In response, ... Redford allegedly looked at him and delivered a line that crystallized their entire dynamic. "You're a character actor, Bob. I'm a movie star. We're not playing by the same rules." For Duvall, that statement laid bare the fraud behind the golden image, revealing a hierarchy of ego that no public persona could ever truly conceal. In breaking his 60-year silence, Robert Duvall has not merely settled old scores. He has forced a re-examination of the very mythology of Hollywood, reminding us that the stories behind the camera can be as complex, conflicted, and compelling as the ones projected onto the screen.